Someone asked for a Horus lockdown. That is in
D.
NANI? Oh, hell no!
yeah. I think it's in the E class.
It's an awesome casual deck that's really fun to use, but super. It's just I wouldn't say super consistent. It does what it wants to do.
I see this as an absolute win.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is going to be another GOAT deck profile for you guys. And I know I've been doing Dragon Ball content, but for this one, I'm going to do GOAT. So I want to bring you guys something special that I've been developing in the works here, and you're going to love it. It's dragon based, but it's mostly Horus. I made like a post on goformat.com asking where Horus Lockdown belongs on the meta tier list, and they all said, or some of them, but most of them said that it was a D tier or an E tier list. So I tried to take that as a challenge, and then I decided to build this list. So we're going to go through the deck list here in this segment, and then we're going to go over the side deck, and then as well as the like how to like take out cards out of your main deck to have you better favorable matchups. And then there's also going to be like a possible main deck and side deck section as well. So stay tuned for that. For now, let's go through the deck list here. So here we have like a very traditional Monster Gate reasoning deck. However, the only thing that is different from this deck and a normal reasoning gate deck is that there is no dimension fusion. That's right. So in this deck, you're going to be using your normal summons more often. It's going to be more impactful as opposed to regular dimension fusion decks, which basically banishes all cards out of the graveyard using Chaos Sorcerer in 2s and 3s, and then you return them all with dimension fusion. In this deck, you're going to use your normal summons more impactfully as opposed to using dimension fusion, and then you're going to play interruptive cards instead of playing dimension fusion. So let's look at the deck profile. So first off, I play Air Knight Parshath. Really good card if you're playing against Go Control. Any deck that just plays Scapegoat, this card just goes through, and then you get to draw an next card. Parshath is really good because it accomplishes two things. It inflicts piercing damage over a Goat token, and it lets you draw a card. So by drawing a card, you dig deeper into your deck, allowing you to see the cards like Reasoning, Monster Gate, Scapegoat, and even Solemn Judgment in this deck. So I also play Blackluster Soldier and the beginning. I think it's kind of a staple if you're just gonna play a deck that likes to beat down. This is definitely gonna be a beat down deck, and BLS definitely has a spot in this deck. Another cool card I play in this deck is Cyberstain. The reason why I play Cyberstain is that nobody ever calls 2 when you activate Reasoning, and even if you don't activate Reasoning, you can actually Monster Gate into this guy, or if you summon this guy, normal summon, and you have Monster Gate, you can play this guy out, pay 5,000 light points to play any fusion monster that's applicable to the situation. Most of the time you're going to go into King Dragion here. So if you look right here, King Dragion, that's most of the time. And then usually the scary part is leaving this guy out in attack mode. So if you have Monster Gate, you can just simply use Monster Gate, tribute away the Cyberstein, so that it's not much of a liability out there. So most of the time you're going to go into King Dragion using Cyberstein, and then when you Monster Gate, you want to get into Horus. This way you have a King Dragion that protects the Horus from being targeted by any card effects. And then this secures the attack to go through with Horus, and then basically from there you'll be able to level up Horus at the end phase to bring into the Big Daddy Horus of the Black Flame level 8. So hit with him out, you'll be able to pretty much stun your opponent for even a whole turn, ideally, and then allows you to push even further on your next following turn. So next card I play is Demok. I think you have to play Demok in this deck just because you mill so much spells in this deck using Monster Gate and Reasoning. So, and also Demok actually does really well against decks like Recruiter, which basically uses cards like Mystic Tomato and Shiny Angel, or even Giant Rat for some decks, and then Sangan. So any monster that Demok battles gets banished. He's not just simply a card that you use to recycle your spell cards. He's also a card that punishes players that set Recruiter cards. So that's Demok for you. Then I also play Fusilier Dragon, the Dual Beast. So you might be wondering, why do I play a random level 7 in this deck? It's because you can set this monster, and then it'll be considered a level 7. And so when you activate cards like Metamorphosis here, and since I played 3 of them, you want to be able to tribute this guy off and then either play King Dragion against many matchups, or in some matchups where they rely heavily on their spells to bring out beefy monsters such as the mirror match, well, then you're going to bring out the Last Warrior from another planet. So depending on the matchup, you're going to go into these either or these 2 fusion monsters to go in there and then steal the game. And of course, I've already mentioned Horus of the Black Flame. It is a level 6, so most of the time people are calling 4s and 8s, because there's a video by GoFormat.com, or I think it was Jinzo and Tonic, one of those 2 creators, where they say if you're going to play against a Reasoning Gate deck, always call either 4 or 8, but most of the time call 4. So in that case, 6 actually sneaks past in. I guess it just depends on the situation, but most of the time 6 is going to be a really good number for them not to call. And then you bring out Horus, beat over a monster, bring out the level 8. And that's essentially it. And then I also play Jinzo. Jinzo's a level 6 as well. So because I played 3 level 6, calling 6 against the deck might actually hurt the deck, but not all the time, because you also play other cards as well. You don't just play level 6 monsters. So it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to lose, but it's a good chance that Reasoning won't go off if they call 6. Next up, you play Sacred Crane just to draw a card. It's a level 4 light monster, so having it in the drop area or the graveyard allows you to bring out stuff like BLS as well. So you also combine Sacred Crane with like Premature Burial, Call the Haunted. Pretty normal stuff. So now let's go into the spells here. The reason why I play 2 Book of Moon here is to be able to be defensive, and like I said before, you're not playing Dimension Fusion, you're playing Book of Moon, cards like that, or Solemn Judgment. And I'll go into the reason why I play Solemn Judgment, but Book of Moon is good just because you can defend yourself, have another turn so that you can draw. Most of the time when people play against Reasoning Gate Turbo, they're not expecting any sort of real traps or real interruptions when they try to kill you, and that's kind of the goal of this deck, because a goal of them to kill you as quickly as possible before you activate Reasoning in Monster Gate. So Book of Moon is a good card to allow you to play defense, and there's a lot of utility that Book of Moon offers, such as not being able to be Ring of Destruction, or if they have a Thousand Eyes Restrict on the board and you can't attack, Book of Moon gets in there and then sets the monster down so that you can attack over it. The other cards I play is Giant Trunade. Since this is essentially a combo deck, Giant Trunade does not. You don't mind the minusing effect of Giant Trunade as long as you have some sort of security in being able to push with all your monsters on the following turn. So Trunade can actually set up OTK, even though it is a minus in terms of card advantage. And then of course you can play the Graceful Charity because it allows you to draw 3 cards, Heavy Storm, pretty staple, and then 3 Metamorphosis. So the reason why I play 3 Metamorphosis is because you want to be able to use this in conjunction with Fusilier in order to bring out King Dragion. But in other cases, you do have Scapegoat. So Scapegoat allows you to bring out level 1 monsters and defend yourself. And so it acts as the 2 things. It brings out a level 1 and then it plays defense. And on top of that, Scapegoat provides sort of like a Monster Gate target, so where you can just tribute a goat token to start doing the milling process of your deck, and then bring out a lot of big strong monsters. So yeah, that's why I play Scapegoats. But Metamorphosis has that utility too. The other things you can do is also to tribute Air Knight to bring out Bolter the Terrible, or in really neat situations you can bring out cards like Fiend Skull Dragon. So you can bring out this guy, or you can bring out Bolter. Okay. Next up, I play, of course, the Monster Gate. Monster Gate is always going to be a useful card, just because you could tribute a token. Other cases, you can also tribute a Dark Monster or a Light Monster, depending on the situation, so that you can have BLS set up for the next turn. My Body's a Shield. So the lock here is supposed to be Fusilier, along with Horus. And the only way to stop this lock is to either play cards like Cyberjar, Torrential Tribute, and Mirror Force. So this card interacts with all those 3 and Tribe Infection Virus. So those are 4 cards that could break the lock. So having My Body as a shield set, or even in your hand, depending on the situation, can prevent that from killing you. Next up, I play Nobleman and Crossout. It's just really good, just so that you can just get the set monsters off the field. You also can play this in conjunction with Book of Moon, because I failed to mention that, and then you can just pretty much eliminate a monster. Then I play Pot of Greed, staple. Premature Burial is a really good card in conjunction with Demok to be able to recycle your spells and then use Premature Burial to bring out something that you discarded from using Graceful Charity, or just in general you have something in your graveyard because you milled a bunch of stuff, you can just Premature it back. And then Heart and the Soul of the deck, Reasoning. I don't need to go much into why I play Reasoning in this deck. It's just really good. Snatch Steal is because you do play Tribute Summon monsters. You do play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different Tribute Summon monsters, but 2 of them are basically cards that you can just normal summon without actually tributing. So you do have that option. So it's kind of like a wild card in that sense. And then you have Call on it. So the reason why I do play Solemn Judgment is because I think of Solemn Judgment as a wild card. And if you are setting up a board and you don't want it to be broken by multiple different cards, Solemn Judgment is kind of like a wild card stoppage or an Omni Negate, as Yu-Gi-Oh players like to say. So it is kind of like an Omni Negate, but it doesn't negate affect monsters, but it does negate summons. So it's a wild card. I was toying around with cards like Divine Wrath, which is in my side deck, instead of a Solemn Judgment, but I found that Solemn Judgment is just more useful against most things. Oftentimes when I have Divine Wrath, my opponent would have cards like Torrential Tribute and Mirror Force to stop me, but Divine Wrath does have a lot of utilities outside of that. So let's go into our side deck here. The first one of the matter is Dust Wombat. So Dust Wombat is a level 3 little beast monster that pretty much prevents any sort of damage to you by effects to 0. So why is this good? Well, with the new showcase of decks that's got released in 2020 or 2021-ish, early 2021, there were players who were playing Demok Mass Driver Burn. Right, so if that deck gets popularized before the next GOAT format championship, you can probably use cards like Dust Wombat, side that in, and then they'll never think to call level 3 off of Reasoning, because again, most people will only call 4 or 8 with Reasoning, or 6. But Wombat will get in there if you do call Reasoning, and suddenly you have something that is pretty much impossible to stop. Pretty much impossible for you to die from burn, because this card just makes any damage for as long as he's face up done to you to 0. So that was what happened. Anyways, the next card I play is Kaiku. Kaiku is now the popular main deck normal summon monster, just because Chaos is running rampant, and then Kaiku kind of just disrupt that. So why not use one of that card, but only one, because I do play cards like Reasoning and Monster Gate to get them out. And oftentimes I will side out one Sacred Crane for one Kaiku, or if you're playing Burn, one Sacred Crane for, Wombat, just depending on the matchup. But typically, if you're playing against a library deck or any deck that plays a ton of spells, you do have main deck's Horuses to stop those spells. Okay. Then I play Spell Canceller, same reason. If you do want a Spell Negate and you can't bring out Horus for some reason, having a level 5 monster in there that can be brought out by Reasoning is definitely useful in that regard. You can also tribute Spell Canceller to shut off the spell effects so that you can activate your spells. So it's not a death sentence to play that as a double-edged sword. Next up, I play Tribe Infection Virus. So a lot of the games I've been playing with this deck, I often found myself locked by Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is pretty normal, and I didn't have anything in my fusion deck or my main deck to actually deal with Thousand Eyes Restrict aside from Book of Moon. So I wanted to up that chance of outing it by main decking or side decking Tribe Infection Virus, so that if I can Reasoning Gate or Monster Gate into this guy, I at least have something to do with Thousand Eyes Restrict. Also, there's also Snatch Steal for Thousand Eyes Restrict as well. I mainly so Brain Control. The reason why I only made this is because if I were to get the Last Warrior locked out, I can essentially just activate Brain Control and then Tribute set. That's essentially the game plan, and I only typically side this card for that matchup. But I mean, I guess you can find other reasons to side deck this, but most of the time you're going to be siding Brain Control out for cards or for decks like the Mirror Match, where they try to Last Warrior lock you. So this is an out to that. For Delinquent Duo, it's a very really tricky card, but basically you just want to side the deck going first, or decks that don't play Thunder Dragon. Yeah, so if you play against it that plays Thunder Dragon, you're kind of risking the fact that if they activate Thunder Dragon, Delinquent Duo is not going to really much stop them, because you might hit their Thunder Dragon, and they're going to discard the other Thunder Dragon. It's typically not really ideal either if you're playing against Chaos, because Chaos decks like to have certain things in the graveyard to set up their Chaos chain going on. So that's why I side it. I don't want to main deck that. Otherwise, it's a great card. I also play Trunade, so you typically, if you play against burn decks or just decks that have heavy back row, you can use Trunade to bounce up all the back rows back to people's hand, and then you can decide in the duo as well on top of the Trunade, and then you can just duo them and then discard 2 more cards. Pretty little cool combo, but other times, you're not going to be siding this card unless you're playing against a deck that just loves to play set back rows and defend themselves. Then I play My Body as a Shield again. So if you are playing against a deck that likes to play destruction, and you see like there's Cyberjar in there as well, or just typically going second, you want to side in a second copy of My Body as a Shield just to stop any destruction effects, because they know that they're going to be trying to they're going to try to try to infection you and then nuke your board of your dragons. So you have cards like My Body as a Shield to stop that. Typhoon. Typhoon is just a good card against like Gravekeepers, because Necro Valley does stop the retrieval effects of Debok, and as well as Premature Burial and Call on it. Other times, Snatch Steal might come up against you, so just having an MST just set there could actually prevent Snatch Steal from resolving and killing your monsters. Okay, the other thing I think there's another reason why I play MST here. I also play it because I want to, so if my opponent does have a 1000 Eyes Restrict and they equips with one of my monsters, MST will be able to go activate during the battle step or the declaration of attack when they attack one of my monsters, and then I MST their or my monster that they stole, and then 1000 Eyes Restrict will have already declared the attack on my stronger monster, and then they'll just take damage and lose 1000 Eyes Restrict. So that's another way you can use Mystical Space Typhoon in that regard. If you're playing against decks like Chaos Flip monsters, or just a lot of decks nowadays like to play Gravekeeper Spy, or just like to set really strong cards like Morphing Jar or any jar monster, well, playing Nulliman and Crossthought in 2s might prevent you from doing that. If you play a lot of just effect monster deck, that's kind of dumb, right? Most decks in this game or in the format of GOAT like to play effect monsters, so playing Divine Wrath can actually deal with a lot of answers. It's just a very useful card in general. If you find that they just are more heavy, they lean heavy on the effect monsters, then you can side Divine Wrath. It's also good against Tsukuyomi too, so if you have a lone Horus level 8 out there, Divine Wrath can actually stop Tsukuyomi from setting your Horus and then activating their spells. So that's one. And here's the two controversial one. I do like Mirror Force over Torrential, but the reason why I side these two cards is because, again, if your opponent's playing against Reasoning Gate decks, they're typically going to want to go hard on the normal summons or special summons just to try to kill you before they get killed by Reasoning Gate. And they also don't know that you're playing Dimension Fusion, so because of that, you have cards like Mirror Force and Torrential to punish them if they try to go in. I always side in Mirror Force and Torrential in almost every matchup, because people just think that I don't have real back rows, and you can surprise them with actual traps in Game 2 and Game 3. Okay, so that's pretty much the deck profile for this. I will be going over a matchup commentary real fast, and I'll be also talking about like possible cards you can have in your main deck or in your side deck as well. And I think that would be, yeah, that was it. So stay tuned for that. Peace. Alright guys, so this is going to be the section where we talk about possible main decks and side decks depending on the meta. Right now, and as we speak, Chaos is very, very dominant. You won't see a deck without Chaos Sorcerer or BLS in the top tables, or just in general the top tier lists that people make. So in that case, let's talk about some of the side deck choices or main deck choices that you can have to counter that. So let's first talk about Lightning Vortex. So Lightning Vortex is a card that destroys all face-up monsters on the field, and it's just going to be on your opponent's side of the field. So it is simply a goat format Raigeki in being able to deal with a lot of things, but being able to deal with a Kaiku that's face up in attack position, or a Thousand Eyes Restrict that's in attack position, or just in any position, you will be able to clear the monsters out, especially if they have goats on their side of the field. Clear out their field, and then you'll be able to reestablish your Horus lock. It is kind of scary to deal with Thousand Eyes Restrict when it's already established, so you will need cards to deal with Thousand Eyes Restrict, such as Lightning Vortex, and then when you somehow try to bring out a Horus, level 8, they can no longer bring out another copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict because they can't use Metamorphosis if they have that in their hand. So Lightning Vortex will have many applications in the future, especially with Horus Lockdown, just because you just can deal with monsters. So it is kind of like a vague way of dealing with monsters. You can also play Smashing Ground too. Smashing Ground is not so bad. So if you don't want to discard cards, which you typically do want to discard cards because you play cards like Premature Burial and Call the Haunted, and you want to have stuff in the graveyard anyways, Lightning Vortex is just simply better in most situations. But you can play Smashing Ground if you don't feel that you need to mine it instead. Another underlooked card that I've stumbled upon in my quest in Go format is Chain Disappearance. So you are going to have a tough time with Thousand Eyes Restrict in this deck, and I keep mentioning that guy for a reason. It's just because it slows down the game, and you don't want the game to slow down. You want the game to pretty much be at the pace that you play. Sometimes slowing it down because you're breaking, but most of the time you want to just pick up the speed. So because of that, Thousand Eyes Restrict is your arch nemesis in that strategy. And so the ruling with Chain Disappearance is if you activate this card on Thousand Eyes Restrict, all copies, including the one that's been summoned through Metamorphosis, will be banished. So that's pretty good. That means that they'll no longer have access to Thousand Eyes Restrict, and that does not mean that you lost all your Thousand Eyes Restrict, because you do also play Thousand Eyes Restrict. So this is a one-sided thing to be able to stop Thousand Eyes Restrict. And in some cases, if you really want to know, you can actually do this when you bring out your own Thousand Eyes Restrict. So you can actually Metamorphosis, right? Bring out Thousand Eyes Restrict, declare priority to actually it won't matter. I was thinking you could just declare priority, steal a monster, but that doesn't work. But you can bring out your own Thousand Eyes Restrict and then activate Chain Disappearance on your own monster, and then this will make them banish. Your opponent will have to banish all copies of that Thousand Eyes Restrict from their extra deck. That's pretty good, right? So just a little meta call. If you think that if you think that this is good. This is also good against scapegoats too. So if your opponent flips over scapegoats and the scapegoats are summoned, they can all be wiped out by Chain Disappearance. So definitely a meta call card. So very underlooked. Kaiku is in almost every single main deck now. So being said, since monsters are now becoming stronger in terms of over 15k, and Go Control isn't that strong of a pick anymore, Bottomless I see coming back into people's main decks. So that's just my little meta-analysis for you guys. I think Bottomless Trap Hole might be played in even 2s in main decks, or in other cases you can just side deck it. But most of the time, I think Bottomless Trap Hole won't be a dead draw. Just simply because of the amount of Kaikus in people's decks. And I think people are also counter metaing. So if people are playing Kaikus, people are probably going to play 19k vanilla beat sticks, such as Skill Dark Magician and Mad Dark Darkness. Just depends on the situation. And so even then, Bottomless Trap Hole will have utility. On top of that, this card also makes them banished, so that their Kaiku in their graveyard doesn't fuel up to the Chaos fuel, so they can play Chaos monsters. Another card I saw on ladder was Desert Sunlight. Pretty cool card if you do have a Horus level 8 monster on the field, and they go summon Tsukiyomi to set your Horus face down. Right after the card resolves and it sets your Horus face down, you can flip Desert Sunlight and flip you can flip the Horus back face up, so it can continue to negate spells. That's typically the reason why Tsukuyomi is played, so that they could pretty much out the Horus lock and then try to play all their spells out of their hand. Yeah. And then the other card I play is Heavy Slump. So Heavy Slump is actually an interesting card, just because with now there's decks like Cyberjar being played in the main deck, and then they make you draw so much. You can actually play Heavy Slump in conjunction with Giant Trunade, and it makes them shuffle away their whole hand. So it punishes them for having so much cards in their hand if you're playing against a deck that plays Cyberjar. But that's probably never going to happen. But this is just there for your knowledge in case that meta ever happens. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the gameplay video. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so this is going to be a video where I just demonstrate to you a common play that you would see in this deck, where you'll be able to level up Horus on your field, and then being able to lock out your opponent from doing stuff. This is a pretty game of one, best of one deck, or best of one matchup, just to see an example of how the deck can actually flow. So here, my opponent goes first, and he summons Berserk Gorilla, and he sets Call the Haunted and Ring of Destruction. Those are pretty good cards to set normally, just so you can deal with any threat. So my play, I set Fusilier face down, and then I activate Metamorphosis to bring out King Dragion. Now, because the monster is set, this makes it so that Ring of Destruction will not be able to interact with the monster I bring out, which is King Dragion. And because King Dragion will protect dragon monsters by card effects. So he himself is a dragon monster, so he can't activate Ring of Destruction. Next up, I activate Reasoning. This allows me, and of course my opponent plays or calls 4, because that's what people just typically call. And of course I hit him with a surprise with a Horus level 6 monster. And of course I'm going to use that monsters to beat over the Berserk Gorilla. Now you might be wondering, well, what if he had Mirror Force set? Because he did not set Mirror Force. Well, I was not going to win that game anyway else, so might as well go for it. So I attack with Horus, I beat over the monster, and now from here I'll be able to set up the Horus lock. Okay, so now I set Nolman and I set Bukamu. And then this lets me level up. The cool thing about having Horus out there is that it also prevents MST or blind MST from happening on my back row, and my back row is going to protect the monster. So it's kind of like an intertwined relationship. Okay. So my opponent draws Snatch Steal, another spell that Horus can negate. And so, like I said before, MST will be, my back row will be protected by Horus. But it doesn't matter, he doesn't have real threats. But in case he did. So he sets pretty much the Mirror Force now. And I still don't have a way to deal with the Mirror Force. So luckily I drew into Pot of Greed here. And I was able to activate Pot of Greed to draw into Giant Trunade. And then that just pretty much secures the victory, because this is 5,700 damage going in. And of course, even if he had Scapegoat to chain, Horus will be able to negate that. So that's pretty much a quick game for you to show. Hey guys, so this is going to be a matchup commentary against Burn, I believe it is. So I think I win the die roll here, and oftentimes you're going to see some hands like this where you do draw Horus the Black Flame in your opening hand, but don't fret, because that card, just because you have it in your opening hand, does not mean you automatically lose. So here I start off with Reasoning Gate, or just Reason, and he calls 5, which is a pretty shocker, but I think the reason why he calls 5 here is because he doesn't want to be... I actually don't know why he calls 5. So he calls 5 for a reason, and I bring out Fusilier. Alright, and then I set E-Controller. So this deck is not originally in my main deck. I was toying around with it just to see what would happen. So here he activates a level limit to set my monster to defense mode, but of course he still can't run over that monster. And then he sets Nightmare Wheel. Okay, and then I draw Metamorphosis just in time for me to activate. So just in case he does have back rows, I think I activate Trunade here. Yeah, activate Trunade here. And then just so that I can get my Horus to go off, I activate Metamorphosis to bring out King Dragion. And then King Dragion does let me special summon a Horus from my hand in case I do draw it, and I did draw it. And I'll be able to special summon, so that's what I did. And I have a normal summon, so I normal summon Crane. Alright, So then I beat over Sangan. He takes 1300, and then I believe I attack with everybody else, and he goes down to 2700. Now he searches for Cyberjar, obviously scary card to choose to get. So then I set this card, and then end phase I get into Horus. Okay, so in case if he activates either swords or level limit B, I'll be able to stop it. Okay, so here he just set Cyberjars and some trap cards. Okay, and then I draw, and it looks like this Divine Wrath came in time. So this is back in the day when I was playing Divine Wrath, but now this is a Solemn. So pretend this is a Solemn Judgment. So I do set Divine Wrath here, and I know that's a Cyberjar because he searched it off with Sangan. So now he tries to get greedy and flip it, and then I just use Divine Wrath or Solemn Judgment. Okay, and then that destroys that card, and then he admits defeat. Okay, now game 2 happens, and I believe, let's see what happens here. I believe I go second. Yeah, I go second. So here he sets his Koala and he sets a Reckless Greed. I think I activate Typhoon here. Yeah, I activate Typhoon here to destroy the set. He activates Reckless Greed. And then I activate Reasoning to get into a Fusilier. Oh, and I think oh, this is going to be surprising for you guys. And then I activate Normal Crossout, and then I set, and then I tribute off the set Fusilier to get into King Dragion, and then I activate a Premature Barrier for game. So this is OTK here. So pretty sad that it happened to him so quickly, but this is OTK for him. Yeah, just to show you the explosive power of this deck, and you don't actually need Dimension Fusion. Alright, on to the next match for you guys. So here I think I win the die roll, and I draw pretty decent. I think I summon Sacred Crane. So the reason why I normal summon Sacred Crane here is that most monsters actually fall below 1500 except for Kaiku. So summoning Crane actually doesn't matter, because if Kaiku were be to summon and they attacked over my Crane, the battle damage is inflicted first before Crane goes to the graveyard, and therefore they can't banish the Crane. And even then, my opponent doesn't actually know that I played Dimension Fusion. So even if the ruling was that Crane gets banished from the graveyard by Kaiku, it actually doesn't matter, because in that scenario, they would fear that I would bring back Crane by Dimension Fusion, so they're not going to banish it. So I set Scapegoats. He starts his turn, and he plays his Thunder Dragon combo. So when I first see Thunder Dragon come down, I'm like, okay, I'm playing Chaos deck. So he loses 2 Thunder. He gains more cards from Thunder Dragon, and he just sets and passes. So I take my turn, and thankfully I draw a Knock, or I had Knock. So then I activate Crossout here. I was debating Tribute Summoning Crane, but him just setting 1 card tells me that that might be Cyberjar or anything that could stop the Crane from resolving. And then plus, him discarding a light monster, most likely this was a dark monster, and the only thing I can come to a conclusion was that it was either Cyberjar or Gravekeeper's Spy. And so I made the call to activate Nobleman Across out here. Alright, and then I simply just attack directly, I believe. Yeah, I attack directly, and I think I pass. Alright, then he summons Tribe, I believe, here. Yeah, he summons Tribe, discards the Thunder Dragon to clear my 1600 because he does not want to crash. Alright, and then he attacks. So I don't flip over Scapegoat here, because if I did, he can simply discard another card to destroy my Goat. I wait until end phase to activate Goat here, so that he can't activate a main phase effect, such as Tribe Infection Virus, to clear my Goat. So then I have 4 Goats on the board. So here I believe I use, instead of using Metamorphosis here, I actually summon Crane. But if I did not draw Crane, I was going to do Metamorphosis, take this monster, and then with Thousand Eyes Restrict and attack him directly. But in this case, I just summon Crane, just because I do have Call the Haunted to set. I attack over it, and then that crashes, and then I set Call the Haunted. So he still has to deal with my Scapegoats now. Now that Tribe Infection Virus is gone. The only card I was worried about was cards like Premature Burial to bring back Tribal Infection Virus, but he did not have it. So I summons Breaker, and he activates the Breaker effect to destroy my back row. I chain Call the Haunted to get Crane, and because Crane says if, not when, it does not miss timing, so I'm able to draw a card. So I bring out Crane, and then Crane gets destroyed, and then I draw a card with Crane. Okay, and then he destroys a token. Okay, now I draw a turn, and then now I drew Monster Gate. I could either do Monster Gate or Metamorphosis. I think I choose to go with Monster Gate here. Yeah, and then I'm able to get Parshath. So, like I said before in my deck profile, it accomplishes two things. It pierces, and then it does damage to let me draw a card. So, I attack Breaker, and then I draw a card, essentially. And that gives me an extra card. And I draw another Monster Gate. Perfect. So now I activate the second Monster Gate here, or no, I don't. So, normally I would activate Metamorphosis to bring up Bolter, but the fact that he's hold all his cards in his hand and he now has a Dark and Light in the grave makes me think that he has Chaos Sorcerer. So I don't actually mind. That he brings out Chaos Sorcerer because I'm not going to Solemn that, and he's going to banish that and then pass turn. So he gets Morphing Jar here. I think what happens next is he plays Dimension Fusion. I check his banish pile, and I had the option to activate Solemn Judgment. Seeing as none of them are real threats, I let him resolve that card. So he brings out all the Gravekeeper spies, and then he sets Magician of Faith. Still keeping all his cards in hand. I still think he has cards like Heavy Storm in his hand, which is why I don't actually set more cards than actually is. So now I contemplate this turn, and I believe I use Monster Gate here. Yeah. So I use Monster Gate here, and I bring out Horus. Perfect. So this allows me to feel safe about my back rows being set, because if Horus does beat over a monster, I'll be able to bring out Horus level 8 from my deck. So first things first, I beat over Gravekeeper Spy using Horus, and then I attack Airshath into his set. Not fearing, of course, Cyberjar for some reason, because why would he activate Dimension Fusion to fill up his board and then set a Cyberjar? It just doesn't make sense. So the only card that I was afraid of was Morphing Jar. And even if it was Morphing Jar, I would actually get a +1. So I did not actually mind it being Morphing Jar. So it ends up not being Morphing Jar. The Faith gets destroyed. I get to draw an extra card, and unfortunately I draw a level 8 Horus monster using Parshath, but that's fine. I do play 2 copies in this deck. I can either choose to play the one in my hand or the one in my deck if I activate Horus level 6 effect on the end phase. So I do just that. I believe I go straight to end phase, not fearing it. And so this is kind of a neat little board here. I do have a Horus that can negate spells, and I have a wild card to stop anything that might stop this combo. Okay, and then he has Cyberjar. So if he does choose to set Cyberjar, which he does, I know that now that's a new card that he set, because he didn't set it before, and so that might be a Cyberjar now. So now I draw for turn. And how do I deal with a Cyberjar? Oh, here I activate Metamorphosis. I then tribute the token away to bring out. My plan was to bring out 1,000 Edge Restrict, steal this monster, then tribute over it. But of course, he instantly concedes, knowing that I was going to bring out 1,000 Edge Restrict. Game, I did side in Kaiku here, and I believe he goes first. So he plays Pot of Greed, the normal stuff, and he sets Spy. So here he sets Spy, and then I summon Kaiku, and I know that he plays Spy based on my previous game with him, so I choose not to attack, and I just set Mirror Force. Here he Snatch Steals my Kaiku, and then he flips over Spy, not fearing the Torrential, and then he tributes the Spy and the Kaiku for a Demok to get the Pot of Greed back. And he activates Pot of Greed, and then he attacks me directly. So you're probably wondering, well, why didn't you activate Mirror Force? Well, I didn't see a reason to not activate it, because it would just be a trade, but he actually used Pot of Greed off of this, so it wasn't threatening enough for me. I wasn't going to lose all my life points. So then he sets Call the Haunted, I draw, and I get Fusilier. And I think in this turn, I believe this is where I contemplate, well, I want to be able to play Last Warrior out, but he knows if I do that, he's gonna fear that something's gonna wipe out this. So I needed a way to wipe out Demok after drawing this card. So I simply pass my turn. because he didn't destroy my back row last turn. He's going to think it's not really a threat. He flipped over Spy last turn after he stole my Kaiku, so he already deduced that it wasn't torrential. So he summons it into the torrential because it doesn't actually matter. And he thinks this, so he attacks here thinking it's safe. I flip over Mirror Force to clear his monster. And then I'm waiting for him, now that I have an empty board, this makes him hesitant to set another back row if he did have a trap card in my mind, because I don't know his hand. And so then I draw for turn, and then I go Heavy Storm here. And then I set Fusilier here. And I don't know why he didn't activate Call on it to get Sangan, but he could have done that to get something. But anyways, he thinks that I'm going to steal his monster. I bring out Last Warrior, attack over the Great Spirit Spy, and then I set Solemn Judgment here. So this protects him from being stolen or something. So here, I think he scoops here. I don't know why. He could have just set Magician of Faith and have Snatch Steal. But even if he does do that, I do have Solemn Judgment to back that up. So he does scoop here. Okay, and so that's kind of all the commentary I want to do for this deck. I do encourage you guys to do play this deck on your own just to see what it's like and popularize it on my behalf. I just think I love Horus. Horus level 8 is really cool. So hope you guys enjoyed the deck profile as well as the match commentary. And peace out, guys. And see you guys on the next time I do a GOAT format deck profile.